final win made us all believe. The world took note with Brisbane's fall. The Robins superb, now we won it all. Red Army, let's hear you sing with all your might. For your world champions in the red and white. We are okay, and we are the champions of the world.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Robin Pod Weekly, which is of course powered by Budget Tyres Autocentre, the only car specialist trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of the world famous Hull Kingston Rovers. Joining me for this week's episode is a Robin Pod regular, Scott Solway, and a virgin to the Robin Pod, Lee Cain. Great to have you both on, guys. We've got lots to get through, not least the fact that the Robins are the Kings of Hull once again. We'll discuss that game in great detail. Scott, before we bring Kenny in, it's been a while since you've been on the Robin Pod, hasn't it? But what have you made of the form that the Robins have been in, maybe over the last, 3, 4, 5 weeks?
Been a bit up and down, hasn't it? We don't know what to expect. We don't know what Rovers are going to turn up at the moment. We played a couple of good sides in Wakefield and Warrington the other week who turned us over. But yeah, it's about us really, I think. It's about what we do on the pitch. And certainly the home game against Wakefield wasn't very good. We didn't really turn up at Warrington away. But, at the end of the day, we've got a win last week as well, which got us back on the horse, so to speak, hopefully. Now we've got a run of games, haven't we, that seem relatively winnable, although we never know, really, in Super League. But it looks like we might be able to string a few wins together over the next 4 or 5 weeks, so hopefully keep us in the top 4.
Yeah, Kenny, welcome to the Robin Pod. I've known you for a great number of years, whether that be watching Hull Kingston Rovers or watching Hull City, whether it's watching England. We've had many arguments in the past. I think that's fair to say. I think our latest one was at Warrington, to the point where you said, get me at that Robin Pod because I know what I'm talking about. That said, there was a lot of frustrated Rovers fans at the Warrington game, wasn't there? And do you know what's more frustrating is the fact that we saw then Warrington put in not a great performance against Lee, and it just highlighted how bad that performance at Warrington was.
Yeah, absolutely, Johno. I think, like Scott said, coming off the back of a very poor game against Wakefield, I quite fancied us going to Warrington because, recent years they're probably sick to death of us getting one over on them, but we just didn't turn up, did we? And then, couple that with, like you said, when we spoke at halftime, everyone's heads were down, rumours were rife. When I got back on the coach after the game, I just thought, really, there's probably no better game we could get next than the Derby game.
Well, that's what I said to you, Kenny. I said that to a lot of people. I said, actually, maybe the best thing is the fact we have got a Derby game up next, because for whatever reason, it might change the course of what's going on at the moment, because ultimately that performance against Warrington was a million miles off, and it almost felt like we needed something like a Derby to try and just get us going again. Get the players going again.
100%. I mean, you play a Derby game. You know what you're going to get. You're straight into a fight. You have to fight, which is what I thought against Warrington. Is as soon as we conceded maybe 2 tries, the fight just went away from us. I think that was plain to see. And then it was more of a case of the longer that game went on, the larger the scoreline's going to be against us. Our Reds seemed to go down pretty quickly.
Yeah, and to be fair, Scott, we've seen it quite a few times this season, haven't we? So if we bring it to the Derby, where, let's be honest, that opening 10 minutes was as bad as what we've probably seen during the course of the season. You can't sugarcoat it. And it's not the first time this season where we've seen the Robins start so poorly. We saw it against Wakefield. We saw it against Warrington previously. Thankfully, that lot are a bag of shit, so we was able to come back and get the win. But you can't deny for whatever reason, we're not starting well in these games at the moment.
It was like the Warrington game had never ended. It was like it was just carried on, and it was the ease that they scored the 2 tries though as well. That's what worried me. We looked like a team who'd kind of thrown the towel in. It was like we didn't want to be there, didn't want to play the game. 12-0 down, 2 very, very simple tries that we gifted. I mean, Caesar breaking the line, and then the kick through, for them to score. And it was just too easy, wasn't it? And it was just like, come on, lads, this is just a follow-on from the Warrington game last week. We're going to have to dig deep and find something here. Luckily, we did in the end, but it was just that's the way we start in games. We've gone from a team that conceded an average of 9 points a game last season to shipping whatever we're shipping now. And I don't know what the average is. I've not worked out this season, but to be conceding 20, 30 points a game, you ain't going to win many games, are you? You're going to be on the wrong end of a defeat on a lot of them by conceding that many points.
Yeah, and Kenny, you can understand why there was a lot of concern amongst the Robins faithful, especially in that north stand at the MKM Stadium when Elliot Mincella's doing a captain's challenge in the first 2 minutes of the game, which looked, I mean, he couldn't wait. He sprinted over as quick as he could to get over to get to the referee. And don't get me wrong, like it's encouraging when the players seem to be fired up for it, but in them moments, like whether he's right or wrong, I think sometimes with the captain's challenge in them early moments, you almost concede it because you never know. You never know when in the 60th minute when you might need it, and to lose it so early. Don't get me wrong; it showed you how fired up there was, but we needed a bit of ice there, and that's where I can understand why a lot of Robins faithful would have been worried about what was going to come next. Let alone the fact that then Hull race into a 12-0 lead. Yeah,
well, I mean, I don't know about you two, but if we go from the first play, I was worried. I mean, what a hit from Salabio on Suasasu. That was the first piece of contact in the game. 2 plays after that, I thought Suasasu still hanging around, back play, shoulders dipped. I'm thinking, just being beat by Wakefield, we've just been beat by Warrington, and in the first contact, it looks like we've lost Sue. And then I think for 10 minutes after that, we just lost the physical battle. Like you said, a complete disaster, captain's challenge, and then a try after that. We kicked out on the full, and then a try after that. And when we was just gifting them possession, gifting them field position. It wasn't really until we kicked the 40-20 that we kind of turned it around. And I mean, I was thinking all week, the table doesn't lie. I'm not just saying this because I don't like Hull FC, but, after 20 rounds, the second from bottom, all we need to do is play basic rugby and we'll beat them. That's what I had in my head. And we didn't play basic rugby, did we? We spilled the ball. Like you say, we made silly decisions, that captain's challenge, the kick out on the full. We just invited pressure on ourselves. And you could see them, they went 12-0 up. I mean, you only had to look at any of their fans that they're thinking, well, here we go. This is our time here. But we kicked the 40-20 and you've got to give credit to us. We did. It was kind of a first half of 2 halves. Like Hull FC dominated the first half of the first half, and then we worked our way back into it, settled down, and then obviously got back into the game, and we go level at half time. And another 10 minutes, really, we'd have gone in front, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and I tell you what, the way they did then turn the game around was great credit to the Robins. I tell you what, though, Scott, Kearney mentioned it there, the inclusion of Salso Sue, and the fact that for a couple of weeks now he's not looked fully fit. For me, that was great evidence of the fact that Willie Peters will not go away from the tried and tested, even if he can get 20 minutes, 25 minutes at best out of a player. He will stick with because Sue didn't look fit, and that's the fact. I think for me, measuring the fact that he did a 20-minute stint, he did all right, but he wanted him to start. I think Willie Peters was determined that he started the game to set this tone, and then great credit for Tom Amon, the way that he came in, and for me, put in one of his best performances of the season in terms of his hunger, his desire, his aggression, but it was controlled. But it was a really interesting inclusion for me, Salso Sue, because, like we said, he hadn't looked fit for a good few weeks now.
The problem is, people like Salso Sue will stick his hand up every week. If he was in a wheelchair, he'd wheel him out on the pitch and he'd do 20 minutes, wouldn't he? Because that's the kind of bloke he is. And I think sometimes, I think the coach and the medical staff have maybe got to just say, look, maybe not this week, but he sticks his hand up to play every single week. He did his stint, he did his 20 minutes, he never came back. But luckily we had Tom Amon, and I think we need to give big raps as well to Carl Lawton. I thought Carl Lawton did superb when he came on. The introduction of Tom Amon and Carl Lawton totally swung the game in Rovers' favour. And I said to my lad, in the North Stand, I said, if we go in at 12-6, we'll win this game. The fact we went in at 12-all, I knew we'd win in the second half. Because as soon as we got back to 12-all, they'd gone. You could see that they'd gone. They were knackered after 20 minutes. They were out on the feet. They're not fit. They're not a fit team. So I said to my lad, if we go in at 12-6, we'll be all right. We went in at 12-all. There was only ever going to be one winner at that point.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, Andy Lasty spoke about how his side were fatigued, and Paul Cook now he's come out and he on the latest podcast saying that he thinks that Hull are not fit, and you know what, that's up to them, innit? I mean, we reap the benefit of that. I tell you what though, Caney, when we look at the opening start to the game, and why we might have been 12-0 down so early. One player who we didn't expect to be probably playing in the position that he was Artem Org. Now, on the Robin pod last week, we thought Jez Litton would probably go into there with Bill Leyland and Carl Lawton. We didn't expect Artem Org there. I doubt that many Rovers supporters would have expected Morg to start there. And he did look nervous in them 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. He looked like he was trying to do, he wanted to play the game at 100 mile an hour, but really he sort of needed to, bet himself into the game more.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think, Morg's hardly played any rugby, has he, since the start of the season. He got his injury to his pec, and then he was out again, and then he's back in for a derby game. Not just is he back in, he's out of position. He's used to playing fullback for Rovers. I know he's played in the halves with me at Catalan, but it's a long time ago. I thought a lot of his passing was forced. He was forcing passes. There was a few errors. What I will say is, I liked his try. Very Sean Lunt-like. The way he just really close to the line, ducked around the defender, straight in. So, and I think from when he got that try, it built his confidence. And what I will say as well is, he looked so comfortable with his boot, like kicking the goals, which, if you've got a good kicker, Morg, he's a points machine. He can start racking points up. But yeah, I think I probably wouldn't have gone for Morg. I think it was probably a little bit unfair to chuck him in, straight after the injury. LFC, you're going to go hunting for him. But yeah, it took him 10, 15 minutes, but then, like you say, he settled into the game nicely. He started getting a few good link-up plays, settled us down, and like you say, we went in at 12-all at half-time. Another 5 minutes on, I think we'd have probably scored again. Could have gone in 18-12 from 12-0 down.
Yeah, it's a great point you make, Kenny, because as well, that try by Morg, you can't coach that. That is just speed of thought, isn't it? That is just a rugby league brain at, working at the highest speed, and to go in for that try was absolutely fantastic. At the time, like Scott said, most people being comfortable going in maybe a score behind, but the fact that it went in level just gave the players such a huge lift going into that half-time team talk. I tell you what, Scott, Kenny mentioned the fact that Morg's kicking, was so good, 7 out of 7 kicks. Bit of a gamble, though, isn't it? Because Reece Martin's been so good, and of course, Reece Martin was dropped from the team. He didn't cover himself in glory at Warrington. Let's all be honest. Don't get me wrong. I always think it's a bit harsh for players to be dropped on the back of a performance when you played out of position. I know Martin's played at centre before, but come on, he's not a centre. He's an out-and-out second rower, really. So I thought that was a bit harsh. But at the same point, when you've got Gildart, Hiku in the centres, and then you've got Whitbread, who was dropped previously, to come back into the side, it seems a sensible decision. And maybe it's a decision, Scott, that keeps Reece Martin on his toes.
Oh, I think so. But you're right. He had a shocker at Warrington, but when you're playing a second row, do you know what? It might only be one position further out than what he's normally playing, but it's massive to a rugby league player. From second row to centre, especially when you're up against quick players like Warrington had. Once they got on the outside of him, they did him every time. But the argument could be for Reece is that, well, as you said, I'm not a centre, I'm a second rower. So he was kind of thrown under a bus a bit, I think. Maybe he needed the week off, though. Maybe it just gives him a week's break. He can come back fresher, maybe this weekend. It gives him an opportunity to have a think about his performances. The worry for me is that we didn't know how Morg was going to go. We know Mikey Lewis in the team. If Morgan had got injured again, no kicker. Lewis not there to kick. Reece Martin not there to kick. It'd have been down to Jason Litton probably to kick the goals for any tries we scored. Luckily, Morg saw the game out, kicked 7 from 7, which was a great first game back for him in regard to the boot. But yeah, I think Reece will probably come back in this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised. He's had his week off. He's had a chance to maybe just have a look at his own game. But he was maybe thrown under the bus a little bit. Play centre. You didn't really do a job, so you dropped. It's a bit harsh, but, at the end of the day, he'll come back stronger and he'll be better for it, I think.
Yeah, and to be fair, Kenny, when you look at the side, we are nearing 100%, 100% in terms of our squad availability. Of course, we saw no Booth. He was out with HIU, so we know Mikey Lewis is suspended and Tavita Pangai Jr. But this is the strongest team pretty much available to us. So people are going to miss out, aren't they? And also, there's an opportunity, Lee, for a bit of squad rotation. And I dare say, we'll talk about the Bradford game after Robin's revisited with Steve Till, because of as people may be listening to this, there's some news around injuries being released. But, there needs to be a bit of jeopardy in the side. Your place isn't guaranteed. And that's what people have been calling out for a long time, for years, really, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Reece Martin's one. We all know Willie Peters. He picks, if he can pick what he thinks is his best trusted team every week, regardless of squad, and regardless of game or occasion, that's who he's going to pick. I kind of had in the back of my head Reece Martin. I don't think he's played particularly well for a while now, and he's got a lot on. Obviously, he's landed the role at PNG. He's just finished at university. I don't know, but like you say, you can sometimes afford to carry somebody like Reece Martin, and he'll still get you 20 points. With his kicking. Yeah,
well, he's our top point scorer this season.
Exactly,
he's got the most points, and he'll probably be one of them players where, look, I dare say, has he over-impressed? Probably not. He's definitely not under-impressed. But what he's done is just kept things ticking along when he played. He keeps it, the kicks and stuff like that. He just keeps us going and going. And even in his role in the second row, there's second row is a bit of a funny position in it, Scott, sometimes, where you do a hell of a lot of grafting there, a hell of a lot of work, but you don't necessarily get the gratification that you might need, or people don't notice you as much, because it's a more of a workman-like position, isn't it? You just go about your business in there.
James Batchelor is a perfect example of that. He's consistently good every week, more in the defensive line than anything. He'll carry the ball in for you all day long, but Batch is a workhorse, and the second row just wet the socks off, don't they? They do all the graft for the centre, and then the man that's further inside them as well. They do all that hard work that nobody else wants to do. Look at Dean Adley's another example of that. You're right. I don't think Reece has done anything wrong. I think since we signed him, look, he's won 4 trophies at the end of the day. So I don't think he's done anything wrong. He's just, at the end of the day, coming towards the end of his career now. As Caney just said, he's got this job with PNG. I don't think his eyes been taken off the ball, so to speak, or anything like that. I really don't. But we've said all along that there maybe needs to be a little bit of squad rotation. We know that Woody goes with his first 17 every week. If his first 17 are fit, you can bet in them, well, that's going to be every single week. But by taking Jar Whitbread out the firing line a couple of weeks ago, Jar came back and had a brilliant game. He ended up playing for the reserves as well one game, I think, when they played Leeds, and he came back and he was superb. So there's a lot to be said about giving a player a week off or a week or two off. So Peter Hickle carried really, really well against Hull. it's no fluke that he had a week off the week before, albeit suspension. But I thought against Stoll, I thought he carried really, really well. Him and Tom Davis were brilliant on that right, bringing the ball out of the defensive area. So there's a lot to be said about giving a player a week off. And I think hopefully if Reece plays this weekend, we might see, a rejuvenated Reece Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, Scott, you mentioned there about the carries, and I think this is why, albeit take away the opening 10 minutes, it felt like the Robins were getting back to what they've been good at. Because if you look at how they laid a platform, it's because of the set players like Jack Broadbent, 161 metres, Tom Davis, 249, Petter Hickey, 197, Joe Burgess, 193 metres, all because of Hull kicking deep and then players getting us into such a great position, covering, that's what we've been accustomed to. We've not seen it as much this season, but that's where the platform's laid for then the forwards to get a bit higher up the pitch to do their work, for us to then put them players together in the attacking third of the field. And that's why after we got a bit of a spanking in that opening 10 minutes, we then got back into the game. We got level at half time. And then, Kearney, that Jack Broadbent try, I think the players felt a lot of pressure. It sort of drained out of them a little bit. And then they started to seem like they was enjoying playing the rugby league. They didn't seem to be playing as tense, I don't know. And then we saw Joe Burgess, once he went away, like I said, it was like a pin going into a balloon. The players just seemed to relax. And I think they felt the game was won at that point. Yeah,
I mean, if you think the second half, so as soon as we come out in the second half, actually, I don't know if this was a bit of a tactic, but we kept them waiting, didn't we? The Rovers team stayed in the sheds for a little bit longer.
Not the best time have done it as well.
Well, yeah, I wonder if that's a bit of a tactic. I don't know. Keep them waiting, keep the nerves going. But and let's be honest, you never see Joe Burgess bomb a try like that, do you? That's a try all day long. Straight after the restart, we're ahead. He bombs it. FC come away with 2 points very shortly after that. Hardacre kicks a goal. But, I don't think any of us was really... Our nerves wasn't settled until Burgess got that runaway try. And then even then I thought, Moy's going to catch him. Is he going to catch him? Anyway, he did catch him, but Burgess just had too much for him. But, just getting back to Jack Broadbent. Jack Broadbent's try, the yardage he covered, to put a challenge in the, one-on-one challenge to win that ball and then turn it over for a try. You feel like Rovers, Jack Broadbent's, got a few critics, but I mean, I'm not one of them. I think wherever you put Jack Broadbent, he gives his all. He's a 7 or 8 out of 10 for me every single week, and I think he goes a bit under the radar with our supporters. We're very spoiled, I think, to have somebody and of his value, and I think Willie Peters values him, and I think we should maybe value him a little bit more than we do.
Yeah, I tell you what, Scott, he's a big boy. He's Jack Broadbent, isn't he? I don't think people realise actually. Like Lee said there, I mean, Jack Broadbent against Logan Moy, there's no comparison really when you look at the size of them. And I remember when we signed him, Scott, opposition supporters, Leeds supporters, Castleford supporters were all questioning, well, why is that? Like, he's going to be no good for you. I tell you what, he's. I bet when Willie Peters leaves and he looks back on his tenure with the Robins, he'll probably nail down Jack Broadbent as maybe, I don't know, not as his most important players, but a very significant player. Just the way that he's been able to adapt and fill in at roles, and also not just games against the likes of York, but big games. Games that mean something. Semi-finals, finals. He's filled in and done a job. I'll clarify. He hadn't done a job. He's excelled in the roles that he's had to play. And I think he's, like Cain said, probably we underestimate his impact on the side.
I think Jack's biggest problem is he'll never, ever probably nail down a position that's his, though, because there's always somebody else who's going to play ahead of him if a player's fit. Like Arthur Moore will always be fullback. Joe Burgess will probably always play on the wing ahead of him. But when he does a job, no matter where you play Jack, he will never, ever let you down. And his utility value to Willie Peters and the team, it's worth 2 points in a game in itself, because you can move him around. You can play him in You can play him centre, you can play him on the wing, you can play him fullback. He even played in the Hearts, I think, against Loch Lane for about 20 minutes, I think. So he has this ability to be able to play right across the back line, and he will never, ever let you down. The problem is with Jack is that he always seems to have another player ahead of him in the position that he wants to nail down. That's the problem. So I don't think he's ever really going to be a first choice, even though he's played nearly every game this season. He's probably only played every game because Artur Moog's been injured. If Artur Moog and Joe Burgess had been fit all season, how many games would Jack have played? Probably not that many. So, but the fact he never ever lets you down. I think he's a great player. I really do. I think he's a great
player. I mean, different era, different times. I suppose the only player I can look back on in recent history and compare him to is probably Craig Hall, in the fact that he had that utility value, and you know what, when he did play, he does a job. He's always a 7 out of 10 or more. He never very rarely.
I think his personality as well, Jono. He don't come across like, let's say Artur Moog didn't get injured or Burgess wasn't injured and he didn't get in the team. It doesn't strike me. I mean, I don't know him, but it doesn't strike me as the type of kid who was going to moan and groan. He's happy to sit there. He's happy to bide his time, and then when he comes in, he's effective. He does a role, and also, because he can play anywhere. Even like when they're doing the training and stuff. When you kind of, the opposition is your own players. It's good for the first team players to have someone of Jack's standard. To when you're doing your moves and you're training against. I tell you what. After we saw Burgess go 95 odd meters, we saw Jake Half going for a try. Jordan Desiree, he sealed the victory. I mean, let's look at some of the players, Cain, who did actually step up. I thought Jez Litton, he really stepped up to the mark. I think he got the man of the match, didn't he? Interestingly, he sort of went into a Mikey Lewis position as well in the second half. He sort of switched from being hooker. We saw the influence of Carl Lawton, rightly pointed out. I think Carl Lawton had a real impact. Thought, to be fair as well, Cain, Elliot Minchell probably had his best game for the Robin. I mean, obviously you mentioned Jez Litton, as we all know. If you can lay a platform for somebody like Jez Litton with his pace, and his ability to run in behind, and every time Jez gets the ball and runs forward, you're gaining 20, 30 metres just with his pace. Now, to me, he's been off the pace for a few weeks, but he's had a niggling ankle injury. So has that been a little bit, affected him a bit more than we realise? Because he certainly looked a lot sharper against FC than he has done in probably the 3 odd games before that. But like you say, you've got Minchella, Dino, they just plough the road, don't they?
Yeah.
And someone like Jez Litton, they love him.
I mean, I suppose, Scott, the only danger is, like, as good as a win it was, it's a derby. The win's the most important thing, isn't it? To get the bragging rights, to be the top team, once again, 9 in a row. I dare say you could maybe look too deep into the performance and think it was so great, because there was there's a lot to like about that performance. There's a lot, well, not a lot, but there's a few things not to like. But, there's no doubt that Jez Litton, for me, had his best game of the season. I thought Elliot Minchella stepped up, and also it highlighted the importance of Dean Hadley. And going back to Jez Litton, 30 tackles, 129 metres. What surprised me most as well was the 12 kicks. Now, normally, that would be a Mikey Lewis type of role, wouldn't it? Putting the deep kicks in, the high bombs in, compared to Tyrone May. I think he put 4 or 5 kicks in. Normally, he's a grubber kick. But it showed how Jez Litton's his influence on the game, particularly in the second half, really came to the fore, and he looked like he looked energised, he looked hungry for it. And what I'm really hoping now is, Scott, he carries that on now into the next game, and he's got a real good opportunity towards the end of the season to stake a claim for the hooker role in the World Cup. This is his opportunity now to really kick on.
Absolutely. If we're being honest, his first 2 kicks right down Moy's throat were dreadful. And Moy got back to the halfway line, and they were building from a very decent position in the field with Hull FC in the first sort of 7 to 10 minutes when they got the 2 tries. But I think it was that penalty that he took where he got them totally off the back foot, didn't he? S.A. his back to him, and he just ran past him, didn't he? Like, where's Jez going here? You know, and that really got us on the front foot. Instead of kicking for touch, he took the quick tap, and that changed the game. That Jez was outstanding from that point. It caused them all sorts of bother, it did Jez. And we have to understand that what we must, you know, while we're trying to praise Rovers' performance, and it was a good performance from Rovers, it was a lot better than we've seen in recent weeks. We have to remember as well the opposition was shit. We have to acknowledge that. You know, they weren't very good at all, were they? And as soon as we got on top of them, there was no. I watched the game back when I got back in from the game, and when they got the penalty and decided to go for 2 at 14-12, all the Sky commentators said, well, it's the right thing to do, take the 2, get in front, you know, right decision, take the points. I'm thinking, that's Ulysses mentality, that's Ulysses mentality. I don't think we'd have took the 2 there. I think we'd have popped it into touch and we'd have built and would have scored. But they knew they didn't have that ability to get, you know, that level of performance against us. And I think Jed was pivotal to that. It caused them all sorts of bother, especially in the second half, and they just couldn't deal with him. I agree. I can't see another. Darryl Clark, maybe, I don't know. I can't see another hooker in the British game that's going to get the England World Cup spot ahead of Jez. I just can't. Especially after his performances against Australia, which were pretty decent as well. You know, when he did play, so I can't see anybody else being picked ahead of him, if we're being honest.
No. If there was one negative, well, a couple of negatives I could take from the game, say without, you know, waxing lyrical over Rovers' performance, was they are second from bottom and they still put 20 points on us. You know, so I'm still a little bit. I mean, you know yourselves, the last 2 or 3 seasons, you know, if we get 3 sets on our line, you're confident we're going to defend it. At the minute, I'm not so sure. I think if we was playing, you know, a Wigan or a Leeds at the moment, you know, and we went 12-0 down and we was on the back foot, it could easily be 18-0 down and it's game over. It's just we seem to have just lost that little cutting edge, or, you know, just backing each other in defence on the line. But yeah, I just always thought that if we just played basic rugby, the table doesn't lie after 20 rounds. They are not good enough to cope with a team who plays basic rugby and has got the ability to score tries.
Yeah, and to be fair, Scott, it's a good point, isn't it? I mean, we did concede 20 points to a side who was second bottom of the league, and let's be honest, have been called out for the fitness, for the fact that they've got so many injuries. Albeit the victory is good, the fact that we've got so many points on the board is a real positive. We do need to tighten up in defence, don't we? It's like, you know, if we're going to have a really good run come the back end of the season and hopefully push into and cement that top 4 place, because I think the league leaders is done. Second place at a really big push, we could get it, but it's about that 4th place or getting into that top 4. We do concede points quite easily at the moment, which is not at the moment, for the course of the season, which is a real frustration.
That's why, like Caney said, you know, conceding, you know, 12-18 against 20 against Hull. At the end of the day, last season, the average, I think, was from like 9, 10, 11 points come the end of the season per game. And when we had to defend 3 or 4 sets on our line, you fancied us to do it. Whereas now, you don't dare. You always feel as though the opposition are going to get through somehow. They're going to find a way to score points. And if Hull can score 20, you know, what can a Wigan and a Leeds, which was what we've seen at Wembley, they stuck 40, in Vegas 50 odd. We know that Leeds and Wigan and teams like that will stick points on us. So we've got to somehow find our defensive structures again. And I don't know what's changed. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about losing John Kenny Dowell and Danny Ward. Of course there is. And the defensive structures have changed with the new coaching staff. But ultimately, the players that are playing now are still the same players that played last season. And yeah, they're maybe a year older and there may be a lot more games in the legs further down the line, but ultimately it's the same players that won you a grand final and a Challenge Cup and a League Leaders Shield last year. So it's really difficult to see how the defensive structures have changed so much when they were so successful last year with the same kind of playing squad. That's what I just can't get my head around. But, you know, I don't know. But I think we can come good towards the end of the season. I think we can. But if we'd have been playing a Wigan or a Leeds last Thursday night, we'd have probably lost the game. If we're being honest, we'd have probably lost the game.
Yeah. totally agree. I mean, it's an old saying, but sometimes, confidence is easy to lose and it's difficult to get back. And I just felt the last few games, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Wakefield game, they're on a similar trajectory to what we've been on for the last, 3 or 4 seasons. And Warrington, a bit up and down, but there was at home. But you just, as soon as we concede, the confidence just seems to disappear out of us, which is what I want to give massive credit, for Rovers, the way they come back against FC, because if your confidence goes, in the Lions' den against your biggest rivals, that's when you need to stand up and be counted, and I think Rovers did that.
Yeah, and as a side note, Willie Peters bows out with 9 in a row. I mean, he's given us absolute bragging rights over that lot since.
Did you see Andy Last's comments in the Hull Daily Mail? He said, "I'm absolutely sick to death of Willie Peters." I think there's a compliment in there somewhere.
Yeah,
even though he probably won't admit it, but I think there is.
Yeah, because we have absolutely had them for so long now, and to be fair, I can't see it not continuing. Of course, next time we play him, it'll be different head coach. Dare say there may be a few changes in the squad, but this run of success is very enjoyable. So I've got nothing but admiration for what Willie Peters has delivered during his tenure in terms of the whole derby. Some of them victories that he's come up with is
Chris, what he's delivered for everything. I mean, whatever happens this season.
I was going to get onto that as well.
Whether we win anything or not, Challenge Cup finals, grand finals.
Katie, I'm saving that for the last podcast before when he actually does leave. I just want to bring success, thank him for the success of the derby.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
And also, don't forget as well, what it's funny, right? It's on a tangent. I was talking to people I work with who are Hull FC fans, and do you know what? When Rovers, let's be honest, weren't great in Super League, do you know what they'd always do? Raise the game. They'd always come up with a performance that not always, but 90% of the time come up with a performance that was like, because they wanted to win for the fans. What I don't see from that lot is they never raise that performance to a level, even when they're doing crap. Like, they don't seem to be able to raise the game. Whereas even when we, like I said, we weren't doing great, we always seem to be able to put a performance in or try and challenge them or come away with a good victory. So, look, the thing that we was hoping for, as well as not just a victory over that lot, was to have some consistency in the side on the back of a number of players playing very well. As we record this, there's some news around which players will be available for that game against Bradford on Friday. But before we discuss that game, Steve Till joins us for Robins Revisited, which includes a tribute to the former Robin, Colin Cooper.
Hi, Chris, and I'd like to begin this segment with some sad news. Many Rovers fans will have been saddened to hear of the passing of Colin Cooper, who was heritage number 669. Colin was a fine scrum half, signed for Rovers in 1961, as I say, scrum half. Played his schoolboy rugby at Charterhouse School, and he was a terrific player, was Colin. Hard, tough, no-nonsense scrum half, who suffered a little bit because he was always reserved to Arthur Bunting or Roger. But when he took his chances with the first team, he took them with some aplomb. And in fact, he was part of the Yorkshire Cup winning team in 1971-72, season 1971-72. So Colin was part of a squad that won 10 consecutive matches against that lot from the other side. And we're nearing that record now. But in the 60s and 70s, we won 10 matches on the trot, and Colin was a valued member of that team. In total, he played 150 times for Rovers and scored 41 tries. Not only was he a good scrum half, but he was a tough boxer as well, good amateur boxer, and was making his name in that sphere also. Rovers played for Dockers and then ended up as coach at Dockers. And he became a publican. Many people remember him at the Shire Horse or the Lone Nelson. And he was a very popular figure around the town. So rest in peace, Col. You were a good one. Right, now let's have a look at a match that took place round 23 in 2010, so that's 16 years ago. We played Bradford this week, we played them then, and it was a Bradford team that were really suffering. They'd lost 9 on the trot under coach Steve McNamara, and just before this match, Stevie Mack was getting his marching orders. So it was Lee Cain who coached Bradford in this match. But it was a decent Rovers team that took on Bradford. Sean Briscoe was full back with Peter Fox and Sam Laters, who's now a director down at Craven Park, both wings. And the centres, interesting, Liam Colburn, but none other than Josh Charnley as well, playing centre for Rovers. He was on trial. Half-back Scott Morello, Michael Dobson, and the forwards Joel Clinton, Ben Fisher, Rhys Lovegrove. Second rows were Clint Newton and Benny Galea, and the loose forward was Liam Watts. He's now employed in the bunker in Australian Rugby League, and I noticed last week he covered his 1000th game in the bunker, deciding on tries and goals and misses and hits. So well done to Benny Galea. The subs for Rovers were Scott Wielden, Jason Netherton, Scott Spaven and Frankie Mariano. Justin Morgan was coach. And Bradford had a lot of young players in the team. And when I say young, I'm talking about people like Craig Kopchak, who was pretty young in those days. Jamie Langley, who spent some time at Rovers. They were captained by Andy Lynch. And in fact, the halfbacks were Danny Addy, a very young Danny Addy, and none other than Steve Menzies, who actually was a great player for the Manly Club down in New South Wales, and who also ended up at Catalans. So an interesting encounter. Bradford were desperate to get back on the winning trail, but that wasn't to happen because Rovers hit them early. 3 tries in the first 20 minutes from Peter Fox, Clint Newton and Sam Laters, who, as I say, is now a director at Craven Park. Bradford tried to hit back, and a new winger called Vinnie Finnegan managed to cross before half-time, as did Craig Kopchak. So it was 20 points to 8 to Rovers at half-time, and Rovers just increased the lead in the first 15 minutes in the second half, with more tries from Briscoe, Newton his second, and Joel Clinton. So Rovers were well on top. Michael Dobson dropped a goal. In total, Dobson kicked 6 goals and the field goal. Danny Addy got 2 goals for the visitors, and Stuart Reid and Heath Lestrange, the hooker, scored tries in the second half. It was a good win for Rovers. As I say, it halted, well, it continued a run of defeats for Bradford. So 9 became 10, but it halted their progress in the bid to get into the playoffs, which they didn't do that season. So, as I say, Rovers 49, Bradford 24. I'd like that scoreline again this week. Maybe we can get it.
Thanks for that, Steve, and a great tribute to Colin Cooper, of course. Former Robin sadly passed away, of course. as we turn our attention to Bradford on Friday night, which is, of course, retro round for the Robins. Scott, just when we was looking for a little bit of continuity in the side and the fact that Willie Peters had nailed his colours to the mast in terms of telling us who would be Mikey Lewis's replacement for the next 4 games at least while he was suspended, Arthur Morg now has broken his finger in the derby, which means it rules him out of the game against Bradford, and it may rule him out for future games ahead of that. And of course, now we've heard that Sauso Su, of course, we mentioned earlier on in the Robin pod that he went off early in the derby. He's going to be missing. And now there is a doubt of a Dean Hadley. He pulled up with a hamstring tear or hamstring injury, so he's going for further scans to determine whether he'll be available for the Bradford game. And just when you think we could get a run of games, Scott, where we could get a settled side out, once again, it's not just injuries, but it's injuries to really key players in that side.
Yeah, it is, and it's hard to deal with that, I guess, but it's just part and parcel of rugby, isn't it? And it's just the next cab off the rank at the end of the day. You have a squad for a reason. I know it's very difficult to lose players, especially like Dino's calibre. I think, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Jesse needs a week off. If you said to Jesse, "Do you want to play us Friday night?" he'd say, "Yeah." But I think they've took it out of his hands now and said, "No, you need a week off." We've got a bit of cover there in the forwards. I think Desiree's been playing quite well since he's been playing back in the squad. Sam Ruckley's done okay. Pamamon was superb last week. We can cover Jesse there for a week if need be, or a couple of weeks. Dino's always going to be a big miss, just for what he brings in, just for his energy and his work rate and his defensive abilities and his carries. He's one of the key players of the squad is Dino, so he's going to be a massive miss if he does have to miss out. Hamstrings are very funny things, aren't they? They can be a week or two, or they can be long term, depending on what the scans show. In regards to the lad can't get a break, can he? 2 pack injuries. Well, he can, yeah, he can. He's got a break, but it's 2 pack injuries, and now he comes back for a couple of games and he breaks his thumb. So. It's rugby, isn't it, at the end of the day, and it's tough for Arthur. But you just got to get on with it. If you want to make the top 4, as I said, it's next cab off the rank. I think that Willie's already nailed his colours to the mast and said it's going to be Ryan Hampshire who'll be coming into the half to play alongside Tyrone May, just due to the style that we play. I think he said in his interview today. So it gives Ryan Hampshire a chance just to try and cement his place for the next few weeks, depending on how long Arthur Morgan's going to be out. Let's hope he doesn't need surgery and it's just a couple of weeks. But if it is 5 or 6 weeks, then we'll just have to deal with it, won't we? Yeah,
I tell you what, Kenny, do you think? There's no doubt Dean Hadley is such an important player to the side. Do you think sometimes, though, when Willie Peters talks about how important he is to his side, that when he's not playing, that the players feel like, hey, we're missing Dino here. Like, we're not the same side without Dino. Like, when you over-talk, you overemphasise how important a player is, that when he's not in the side, it's very hard to then compensate for it, even if you might have, I don't know, a player who's as equally as good at doing what Dean Hadley does. But psychologically, I wonder sometimes, does it have an effect on the players, just knowing that he's not out on the pitch?
Yeah, possibly. Everything what Scott said about Swassa Su applies to Dean Hadley, doesn't it? I think, Dean Hadley's probably saying, "Don't worry about my hamstring, I'll play." And actually, when he needs telling, you're might have to sit out, hopefully for a week or rest or whatever. But yeah, I think you're right. Dean Hadley just leads by the front, doesn't he? If when you speak to him off the field, he's not comfortable. I'll tell you where he is comfortable, on the field, and I think he drags everybody along with him. He leads by example, and that's a big gap to fill. Or whether even for whoever comes in and fills Dino's position, even mentally for them, they've got in there and I've got to do what Dino does. Am I being judged because I'm playing in Dino's position? Is the rest of the team going to follow me like they do follow Dino? But like you say, yeah, I agree. And on.
Go on.
No, I'm just going to say, just getting back on to Arthur Morg, I feel so. I know it's part and parcel of the game, but the kid's fought his way back. It's mentally, it's not easy. Sat watching your team play while you're on the sidelines. Fought himself back, got back in the team, got injured again with the same injury, and now he's got injured again. So I think we the staff need to get their arm around Arthur and get him in the right place mentally and get him whatever he needs, whether he needs an operation or not.
Yeah,
do the right
thing. The thing
thing.
with Arthur Morg is, as a player, you want the confidence in you to know that you're going to play. Like, don't get me wrong, Jeopardy is really good in terms of, like we said earlier on in the Robin Pod, about actually your position is never 100%, because if you don't perform, you're out. But there's no doubt Arthur Morg will have enjoyed knowing that he's going to be in that position for the next 4 games, to give him that confidence, that he ain't going to be dropped. He can grow into the game. I tell you what, though, Scott, as good as Bradford have been, when you look at our squad right now, there should still be enough to take on an injury-ravaged Bradford squad. A Bradford side have taken the decision not to bring in loan players to supplement injuries, but have decided to promote from within, from their reserves and academy, which is a bold decision to make. But even with them 3 players missing for the Robins, we should still have more than enough to beat Bradford. Yeah. And I don't think that's arrogance. That's just me looking at the squads that are available.
I think they've lost Ormondroyd and Nicarima now as well, haven't they? Another 2 injuries that they've lost. And Nicarima's probably one of their better players as well. So, yeah, they're injury ravaged at the moment for Bradford. They're doing it tough. But, they're not going to get in the top 6, Bradford, are they? So why bring in a load of lone players? Why don't you just play your academy or your reserves or whatever you've got and give them a game? And, if they get 50, 60 points stuck on them, then they do. But, you're just giving them a bit of blood, aren't you? Blooding them in a game against the current Super League champions and world champions as well. Why not? It gives them a bit of experience. But, yeah, regardless, and you say you don't want to tempt fate, but regardless of who we've got missing, we should still have more than enough to win convincingly against Bradford at home on Friday.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, though, Kenny, we're going into an important run of fixtures now. Now, I mean, a good few weeks ago on the Robin Pod, I said that, I can't remember after which game we lost, but I said at some point, I think Rovers are going to have to win probably 5 games in a row to really put us into that top 4, top 3 maybe. Now, if you look at it, we've got Bradford at home on Friday, then we follow that up with Castleford away, and then we've got them crunch-free games in a row, aren't we? Which is, pretty well. I don't want to say unprecedented, because if you go back through the years, rugby league used to be played like that, where there was playing, Sunday, Tuesday, whatever, because of the weather and whatever. But we're in a real crucial run of games now, and when you look at that, Bradford at home, Castleford away, Catalan at home, Warrington at home, to lose at home. Do you think we need to? Do you think they should be? Or we need to win all 5 of them?
Yeah, I would say so, and I think we're more than capable of doing that. Just take the first one, Bradford. I know they're ravaged by injuries, but we can only play what's in front of us. I watched the game against Leeds at the weekend. Didn't think Leeds were particularly great, but Bradford didn't even look like they could string, 3 or 4 passes together, did they?
Well, I'll tell you what, to be fair, Lee, I'll tell you what Bradford did, very much like Hull on Thursday. They took control of the opening, 20 minutes, put points on the board, and then after that, ill discipline, injuries, errors. They're just, so, I do think they're a side where, they'll have spells in a game, but I tell you what, they're there for the taking when they're on.
I think we're a little bit like Leeds. We're experienced enough now to be able to manage those periods and then get back on top. So, and I back Rovers at home against anybody. On our day, we've only lost 1 at home. In a year or however long it's been. The crowd on our side. So I don't want to tempt fate, but I'm going for quite a convincing Rovers win. I still think, like Scott says, with Desiree, Lawton, Luckley, Amon, I don't think we're going to miss the Dino and Sue. I think we can afford to sit them out and still be really strong. And then moving on to Castleford the week after. This is a funny one for me because Castleford are up and down, aren't they? I mean, they've got some size of Castleford, but you see in 1 week they're absolutely garbage. The week after they look really good. So not quite sure what we're going to get at Castleford. But again, if we play 70-80% of what we know we can, I think we should see that game out. Catalan, I'm kind of putting in the same as Castleford. Who knows what you're going to get off Catalan? I fully expected them the other week to go to St Helens and win. That was awful. So they're up and down. But again, Rovers at home, so I'm going to back Rovers. And then, like you say, we're into that crunch period. Warrington, Toulouse. I mean, sometimes it's about not who you play; it's about when you play teams. And Toulouse are the one for me at the minute. I don't want to play them right now. I think they're in a really good vein of form at the minute.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, I mean, when you reel off them sides, you've got no idea what they're going to come up with because they're so erratic in terms of the performances and results. So it's going to be That's why.
And teams like Castleford, they're playing without pressure, Johno. They're all about next year, aren't they? They're all about getting the roster ready for next year. They're playing for pride, really. They're playing without pressure. Well, say without pressure, only pressure to perform for their own fans. But, I think their own fans are already accepted. If they get beat, they get beat. It's all about next season.
Yeah. And I tell you what, Scott, other than the maybe St Helens victory at home, do you think we've seen a proper 80-minute performance victory? 80 minutes performance out the Robins this season?
No, I don't think we have. We haven't had that consistency that we had last season, obviously. And for me, it's not so much who turns up in the next 5 games against us, it's if we turn up. Because we don't know what we're going to get. That's the problem. We're so hit and miss at the moment. When you look at the Wakefield game and the Warrington game, and then, we're okay last Thursday, but we don't know what we're going to get. This is the problem. We don't know which OKR is going to turn up. 1 week we might be okay. Next week, some of the errors that we make and, the admin errors and set completions are down at 60-70%. So you don't know what OKR is going to turn up. I think we've got to do what we do well and not worry about the opposition. Because if we, like Caney said, and you've said it as well, if we play to 70-80% of our ability, we'll beat most teams. Maybe apart from the Wigan and the Leeds of the world, where you've got to be right in your game to beat them. But we know that. But no disrespect to the opposition like Bradford and Cass and Catalan at home, Toulouse at home. If you're at 70-80% of your game, you should still have enough to beat those teams. But we just don't know which Rovers are going to turn up at the moment. This is that problem. My concern is more about what Rovers do than what the opposition do.
Yeah, great point. And I think that's Willie Peters' mantra all over, isn't it? It's not about the opposition, it's what we do and whether he can be happy, whether he can be proud of the performance, let alone against whatever opposition, but in terms of the performance, and that's what the really important thing is. So, Bradford Bulls on Friday night. It's retro round. It's going to be, no doubt, a really great night under the lights. Hopefully the Robins come away with a victory. Before we wrap up this week's Robin Pod, though, of course, we'll finish with question time. Okay, not as many questions to get through on this week's episode of the Robin Pod. Maybe that's because the Robins have won, so that might be a factor in that. But that said, we've got some really important questions to get through. So, Scott, I'll start with you. Sean Michael, a great listener of the Robin Pod, he says, has anyone else ditched some of the so-called ULKR fan forums? I'm guessing that's on Facebook. The negativity and clueless bandwagon takes are draining. No player crosses the whitewash intending to underperform. We've come a bloody long way. Sometimes it's worth looking west and appreciating just how good we've got it. Look, Scott, I suppose, I mean, don't get me wrong, and this is the thing is like, if a side's not performing, a player's not performing, whether you watched them for 1 season or 50 seasons, they're still there to be called out. But I suppose what maybe Sean's alluding to is the fact that the pile-on seems to be more faster, quicker than it's ever been when players don't do things, and they're there to, a lot of people there when they do well, like at the derby, lauding them. But at the same point, you can't go too far the other way when we lose. I don't know, and I couldn't understand what Sean's saying there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting that balance into it. At the end of the day, I don't really go on forums or anything like that. I don't really read them, if I'm being honest, because they're just people's opinions at the end of the day. And when somebody comes on and says something negative, and somebody will back it up, and then somebody will back it up, and you're just thinking, I'm not saying that players can't be called out. They can. They're not free of a hit. You know what I mean? Especially if they're putting as a team an awful performance. I think my problem is when people bag individual players, because you don't lose as an individual, you lose as a team at the end of the day. I know there was some hoo-ha about somebody verbally abusing Sam Luckley at Warrington the other week, in the stadium at full time and stuff like that. That's overstepping the mark, No player goes out to lose a game and to play badly. I just think social media, it's a cesspit in it, and people just hide behind the keyboard a lot of the time, and they can say they think they can say what the hell they like because it's on social media, and nobody can stand. There's nothing that can be done because they can just say what the hell they like on social media, and then other people jump on the bandwagon. It's difficult because I don't think people realise how well Rovers did last year, and I don't know whether we overachieved. We probably did, if we're being honest. And there was always going to be a drop off this season, always. Maybe not as much as we think we've seen, losing 7 games, but there's always going to be a drop-off. You're never, ever going to back that up. We're the world champions. We're the grand final winners. We're everybody's target. Everybody wants to beat us. You're not going to win every game. And there's going to be games where Rovers drop off and the opposition are better than us. It's as simple as that. That's life. That's rugby. But to go bagging them on social media, everybody's got a right. If you pay your money to go and watch your team, you've got a right to say what you want, as long as it doesn't overstep the mark. But jumping on the bandwagon, I don't know whether it's a season or whether it's 40 seasons, however long you've been going. A lot of us have seen a lot worse than this. When you've lost 51-0 at Whitehaven and 1-0 at home to Barra, when you've missed a penalty going in front of the sticks with 10 minutes to go. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm still revelling in last season, to be honest with you. I still don't even think last season sunk in. And we've won a trophy this season. We became welcome champions in February this season. If we don't win another trophy this season, I'll take that. No problem.
Yeah. And I suppose the thing is, Kenny, about them discussions are about when you're on the bus home, the train home, when you're sat in the pub with your mates and you're having them talks and you're saying what you think, and then what you do is you sort of think you won't have them conversation with the players though. They don't need to hear what your opinions are, because to be fair, our opinions in a lot of ways are irrelevant. They play for the coach, they play for the what the tactics are and stuff like that, and I think that's where people now have almost got a right to go, well, I've spent X amount to come and watch you, so you must perform to a certain level. But it don't matter how much, you've spent thousands, Ken. It don't matter how much you spent. That doesn't make a player play any better because they're playing to the tactics or the
I agree with everything what Scott said, but I'd go back from last season. If you go back, well, basically under Willie Peeters' tenure, the expectation has risen year on year and year because of what we've achieved year on year on year. We've been climbing and building. Me and you had a bit of a moan at Warrington at half time. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a moan and a groan. You've not played very well. When you're going online, keyboard warriors and everything else, you don't need any of that. Rugby league players know when they've not played well. I don't think they're gonna. They're not like footballers. You're not going to hide behind every excuse under the book. That they know themselves. It's how they come back and react the week after. I do think, and I've always kind of felt this, supporting Rovers all my life, is we do have a small element that kind of has to kind of not pick on one player, but or pick on situations. Like Petter Hicker was a good example when he first came, and Willie Peeters played him out of position. Within 3 games, he was the worst player we've ever had. let's get rid of him. It's a complete waste of money. You know, you've put him in his correct position. He's been a great signing, and I'm happy he's extended. So I do feel
the greatest example of that was Sean Kennedy-Dowell, wasn't it, in that first season?
I do feel we do have, and every team will have it, John, a small element of people who, you know, have to get on somebody's back. There has to be somebody to blame, or you know, sometimes there's no one to blame. Sometimes the other teams, like you both said, you know, we're the hunted. They're out to get us. You know, they want to win trophies. We've got no God-given right to go out every week and win games. Other teams want to beat us.
Yeah, and that's why it's not just, you know, what we do. Anyway, like we said, sometimes opinions are better voiced in the terraces, in the concourses, on the buses home, in the car home, in your living room, and maybe not in front of the players to the faces, because they are trying 100% to try and get the victory for the Robins. Let's have a look. I'll tell you what, Lee. Matt Baxter, he says, I thought he was amazing, but do you think it was Tom Amon's best performance in a Hull KR shirt on Thursday?
Best performance. I certainly think he was well up for it. I mean, you know, when he went over for the try, everyone else was looking around as if to say, you know, as he got it down, he was up straight away. You know, you could tell physically he was over the moon with that. I just thought he had that extra little bit of, he was psyched up, wasn't he? You could tell he was psyched up, but he was controlled aggression as well. You know, sometimes players get a little bit too psyched up and they go and try and knock people's heads off and give penalties away. But I thought everything Amon did, you know, was controlled for the benefit of the team. Yeah, I probably agree with him. I probably think it probably was. And hopefully that's not just because it's a derby game and, you know, he's raised his game. We need to see Tom Amon perform at that level like we know he can and has for other teams, for us, week in, week out.
Yeah, and there's no doubt with Celso Sue not playing against Bradford, there's an even bigger opportunity for Tom Amon to show what he can do. I'll tell you what, Scott, James Scruton says, do you see any players who are contracted for to next year and beyond being moved on to free up some space for Nathan Calis to bring in 2 or 3? And if so, who? The club have made no secret, have they, that they're keeping a tight squad. There's not really much room to manoeuvre. I don't know.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because, well, we're going to have, Pangar Jr. is probably not going to be here next year. We've got Reece Martin who's leaving, so we've got a space there, so we'll be able to use his, I would have thought. His salary cap, Pangar Jr.'s salary cap. I don't think there's a lot of wiggle room, but at the same time, I can't imagine Nathan Calis is coming in to not have his own stamp on the team either. I'm sure that there must be some sort of, I don't know how much, we keep talking about a cap and we haven't got any manoeuvrability, but I can't imagine he's coming in and to work with this exact same squad and not have any impact on his playing squad. I really can't. So, but moving players on who are already contracted, we've done it in the past. We've done it for the last 2 or 3 seasons now, where if we need to find space in the cap or we need to find space for another player, we will move players on to do that. Who that will be, I don't know. There's a lot of rumours potentially flying around, but it'll be interesting to see if that is the case. I mean, it's something that Willie's certainly done in his tenure. You know, he has moved players on during contract to bring another player in. Whether that's going to be a continuation under Nathan Calis, we'll find out, I guess. But as I say, I can't imagine for 1 minute he's going to come in and work with, which he will. I mean, he will be. He'll be working with Willie Peters' team predominantly. But I can't imagine he's going to come in and have no impact on some and have no say on some of the players that are going to be playing for him. He must do. You know, I can't imagine that. There'll be some sort of wiggle room. I'd say the Pangar Jr., he won't be here. Reece Martin's going. There'll be other ways where they can probably play around with it a bit. I don't know, but he's going to have some say on his squad, isn't he? Surely.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what I need to check. I should have checked actually, because I know if, and this is very interesting in terms of Willie Peters going to Papua New Guinea. Obviously, over in the NRL, you can sign a contract agreement with Papua New Guinea for 2028, stay with your club for another season, but it removes you from their salary cap. So that gives you the room to bring in another player if you've got a player who's going to be signing for Papua New Guinea. Now, I don't know if that applies to Super League as well. Now, I mean, there's a lot of ifs and buts there because, you you know, what I'm alluding to is the fact is there are a couple of Rovers players who may be following Willie Peters over to Papua New Guinea. We don't know. He's had first-hand, you know, he's had a first-hand look at some of these players for a good number of years now. Who knows what might happen? Maybe that might be where some room comes to manoeuvre. But it's very hard to look at the side to see who moves on without, you know. But then that's us being sentimental as well, isn't it?
I mean, you would think, yeah, you would think Nathan, you know, during his interview would have said to Paul Lakin, you know, every new coach, even though he's inheriting a very good squad, needs a few new players, don't they? You know, new players come in, they push the existing players forward so they're not settled. You know, you've got to be on your toes because someone's coming through. Surely they've had that conversation. There must be some wiggle room somewhere. Yeah, 2 or 3. I can't see more than 2 or 3. Like you say, I mean, Reece Martin, like Scott said, obviously he's going to need replacing. Obviously, we're losing a kicker there as well, so we could do with a player really to cover Morg on the kicks.
Time will tell, wasn't it? And all I'd say is at this point, probably just keep your faith in what the business the club have done in the past. I think 99.9% of they've got it right. They've got it right. So let's hope that continues. I mean, there's going to be a lot of turmoil. There's going to be a lot of things changing. That, you know, we've been through such a era with Willie Peters. Things are going to change. Now, let's see how that pans out. But let's just keep our faith in the way that the club have done the business, because ultimately it's worked for us for the last 4 years. So let's just keep backing that and see where it leads us to.
I mean, I don't know what you two think. I mean, I think obviously we've had 4 years now of building sustainable success. You know, a new coach coming in, a lot of backroom staff's left, a few players could leave. We really could maybe do with. If you look at Rovers historically, we've done good things, and it's been immediately followed by, you know, bad doom and gloom things. We need to establish ourselves year in, year out now as a top 4, top 5, top 6 team, and, you know, and get some sustainability. We don't want to build all this up. You know, build the crowd up now, you know, to then kind of drop back down to mid-table mediocrity and lose everything what, you know, Willie and Paul Lakin and the board have built.
Yeah, and that, I mean, ultimately, I know we're going off slightly on a tangent here, Scott, but last season, look, for the past 3 years prior to this season, there'd all been, everything was going in one direction. The direction of travel was silverware. Get to silverware, win something. I need to get rid of him. Why? Because I need to bring him in. Why? Because if he comes in, we're going to win some. It kept going, that juggernaut just kept going. The supporters, we was all going with, sponsors were all heading in that direction. Then we've got there, and then we followed it up with a World Cup challenge, which is great credit to the boys, really, how they did that. And now we're going through that lull of trying to get the same thing going again, because we're going for the same thing, but the motivation's different, isn't it, Scott? And that's where I think the challenge is for this side right now, that motivation's slightly changed, and I think there's probably a bit of turmoil in dealing with that.
Yeah, I think what happens is that when you've won everything, how do you get yourself up to winning it again? But good players do, don't they? You know, good teams do. Wigan have done it for years. They'll go and win it all again, and they want to win it again, and they want to win every trophy. And I think it's that mentality of, you know, the ability to be able to keep pushing on and keep pushing on and keep pushing yourself forward and wanting to win and wanting all that success. I still think, and as many people have said, we need to promote from within. Our youth system, our academy system, and the reserve system needs to be far, far better, because only then can you bring in from within. And, you know, if you look at Wigan's kids and Leeds kids and what have you, they can just bring Wigan especially, they just bring a kid out of the academy, don't they, and plonk him in the first team. It's like he's been there for 4 or 5 seasons. How do you get to that? But what we've tended to do for the last few seasons is we've gone and signed who we want. We'll go and sign him because he'll make us win a trophy. We'll go and sign him, as you've just said, Johno, he'll make us win a trophy. And that's worked. But I don't know if that's sustainable. It's not sustainable as a club to be able just to go and handpick the players that you want to stand to win you a trophy. There's got to be a point somewhere where the academy and the reserve system comes to fruition, and the scholarship, where you start bringing local kids through, just like Wigan do, just like Leeds do, just like Saints do. Warrington are even doing it, aren't they? You know, with that the rear lad and the fullback. You know, they've done it now. Our biggest downfall, for me, is not bringing enough local talent through. But you can only bring it through if it's there. You can't just shove a load of kids in the team. You know, they did it last season. They're playing Billy Big Bollocks, saying, "Oh, we blooded all these youngsters last season." You're 13. There's a reason you're 13, because they're not good enough. So what? Ultimately, they're not good enough. So it's got to be one or two every now and then to enhance your squad. That's where we need to improve. We've got to be better at bringing local lads through the system and getting them into the first team. And, you know, sometimes just blooding them and saying, right, there you go and play, see what you can do, and then see what happens from there. That's what I think anyway.
Yeah, and Tom Noble, he last question. Well, it's more of a rant statement than a question. He says, "Why do we sign 30-plus-year-olds on multi-year contracts when Wakefield can sign 27-year-old NRL Grand Final winning Tyson Smoothy on a 3-year deal? I realise that he's now going to Perth after his season, but that's by the by. He signed a 3-year deal with Wakey. I dare say the reason we can't sign them players at the moment is because of the salary cap and the fact that players like Elliot Minchella, Jeslet and Mikey Lewis have then got multi-year contracts, and their contracts have probably earned them a bit more money. And because of the salary cap, the money's not there. And that's a wider issue in Super League, I think, around salary cap and how you can bring players in, which takes us back to the question about Nathan Calis and whether he'll have some room to manoeuvre. So it'll be very, very interesting what happens over the next maybe 2 to 3 months in terms of announcements, because, like we said, the club have been very prudent over the last few seasons in terms of their business and doing it early and getting it right. So when the coaches come back for pre-season, they've got the squad and they're ready to go. So, Kenny, thank you for making your debut on the Robin Pod.
Enjoyed it, Johno. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk about all things OKR, mate.
It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I really value your contribution. Scott, as always, thank you for your contribution.
You're welcome. Always welcome, mate.
Don't forget the Robin Pod is powered by Budget Tyres Autocentre, the only car specialist trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of Hull Kingston Rovers. Don't forget, if you go into the game on Friday, be loud and proud. But for now, live, love, laugh and be happy.
This is the Robin Pod. Robin Pod. This is the Robin Pod. Whoa. Throughout the years, whatever the game, the Red Army's passion is always the same. Decades pass, now we rise anew. Rovers fans, this pod is for you. We won the cup, we ruled the league. A grand final win made us all believe. The world took note with Brisbane's fall. The Robins superb, now we won it all. Red Army, let's hear you sing with all your might. For your world champions in the red and white. We are OKR and we are the champions of the